keep this thing going. My talk is React Tunnels, the library I wrote, or I guess the utility that I wrote for React, so hopefully that makes sense to some of you here. All right, as Jeremy mentioned, props are paramount in React, and they're awesome. It's an awesome API. It's very straightforward. It's explicit, it's synchronous, it's easy to debug. It's great, except that sometimes it can be a pain. So this is the sort of the downside or dark side some of the time. So you might have a deep component. When I say deep, I mean deep within your tree of components in your application. Oh, crap. 1 second. I had to move it to the side, sorry. So you might have a component that's really deep in your tree, and you want to provide a property that you defined much higher up. And so what happens is, or let's imagine a scenario rather, you have a new action handler, say it's a Flux action, called post message that you want available in some button component. And it's 10, 15 layers deep in your application. So pretend these components are all rendered in their own render methods. We had this layout here. We have our app controller, that's the thing at the top level that maybe define this method, and we have our button down there at the bottom. And now we have to go and add this prop called post message to every layer in between, which is fine. That's explicit, right? You would know if Heroku would yell at you when you didn't have post message passing the list here. So it'd be very easy to find where the chain failed. But it also is a lot of typing and not necessarily so fun. So why don't we just require that dependency in an external file? You could do that some of the time, but singletons can be problematic, so it doesn't work with server-side rendering, client-side rendering stuff a lot of the time. Sometimes there's things that you define within a React component that you can't necessarily export and require at a lower tier. Why can't you use context? You can actually. It's not a documented feature of React, but it is available, and that's actually what React Tunnel uses. It requires you to write your components in a specific way, so you have to be aware of it. You have to purposely adopt it, and that's not necessarily bad, but it has trade-offs. So what does React Tunnel do? It has two parts. First part's a provider, and where contextual information exists within your component tree, you would provide it using provider. So it has a single prop called provide, and you're just kind of like tucking this thing away and saying, I want to provide post message to anybody who cares. That's within my render tree. And then wherever contextual information is needed, you inject it. So we created a decorator that takes in some function that peels off or pulls off the thing that you care about, in this case provide post message. And we wrap our button component in that. So we had this, and now we have this. So we get to strip out all those layers of prop passing, and we have our providing app controller at top and our injected button at the bottom. And any other layer could inject that value as well, and you can have many other values injected. So what is it useful for? Device dimensions in React Native, if you want to listen to the rotate thing, whatever, and you want to pass that down. That's context, right? That's not specific to every component, but lots of components care about it. So you don't want to pass device or viewport to every component you write, but you might want certain components to care and be able to take actions on it. Flux is sort of the predominant paradigm for managing the rest of the MVC part of the unit tier. And you might define actions. You want to make them available at low-level components. You don't necessarily want to have to pass this down. Anything else that's really a pain to pass deeply as props, it's useful for. So here's an ES6 example. My syntax heading is kind of messed up, but you can use inject as a decorator for this class. So we're basically saying pull off post message and provide it as a prop to this post message button, and then you would export or in this case, we're rendering the thing. So yeah, more at this repository.